Hi everyone, my name is Donnie and I'm a teacher here on the Take Lessons Live platform. Today what we're going to be doing is answering a question that I have been asked many different times. And it's basically, how do I set up my guitar amp to get the most out of it when I'm getting started? How do you basically set up a guitar amp? There's lots of different options. Every guitar amp is a little bit different. And so how do we go about this in the most effective way to get everything set up properly? So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. It's going to be fairly generic. I'm going to show you how to do it on almost any amplifier. And just basically, how do you get your amp set up so that it sounds as best as it possibly can? Now obviously, amps vary in quality. You're going to have some amps that are decent, some that are not so decent, and some that are really good. And so we're going to have lots of variety in that. But I'm just going to give you something for the middle of the road. Any amp should be able to do this stuff. And so I'm going to try to walk you through the process of setting it up. Now to do so, you'll see that I have down here on your screen a picture of it's actually a program that is controlling my guitar amp that's actually in my studio here. So when I'm turning these knobs on the screen here, you're actually going to hear the actual effect of that knob in your headset. So what I'd recommend is using some headphones to watch this video, as it will help you to get your best sound quality and really show you the difference in these chords as I play them through the amp and I make changes through it. So let's get right into it. So first things first, you'll see that as I'm playing through this stuff, I have my my volume set first. Now on the panel that we have right here, you'll notice that there is no master volume. There's just this what's called a channel volume right here. Some amps will actually say channel volume, some will have a volume, and then they'll over here have like a master volume. It just depends on how it's laid out on the top of the amp. The master volume is actually located only on my physical amplifier, and so I have that adjusted to fit what the volume that I want in my room. Basically what you do is that you're setting the master volume to the loudest you want it to be. So your amp has a lot of variation within how loud you want it to be, so you set the master to be comfortable in the room. The channel volume, as you'll see here, is what allows me to make adjustments up to that point. So if I put it at 50%, what it's doing is it's going to give me 50% of the master volume, what the top end of that is. So when I play that chord, you'll hear that. And if I turn this up, you'll hear it increase a little bit. If I turn it down, if I turn it down this way, it gets quieter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave it about here, because that seems to be pretty comfortable at the moment. I'm gonna leave it about there. That's going to be fine. What you want is to basically leave the volume with the channel volume, set it to as high as you can. What I'll normally do is just set it to 100 and then change the master volume to fit the room. Now this varies per amp, but if you have a channel volume and a master volume, that's what I do. Just set the volume all the way up and then change the master volume to fit what is comfortable in the room. You can also do it the other way around, but that's how we're going to do it today. And I should mention that we're going to go for a crunch sound right here. So you're going to see there's different amp models. So I have a clean, a crunch, a lead, and a brown channel. And then I also have an acoustic channel. So this is one that that's on this particular amp is designed to have an acoustic guitar plugged in. And so when you use that amp setting, it basically helps to bring out the different characteristics of an acoustic guitar and the different types of pickups that are within that type of amp. So we're going to use the crunch channel though, because we're just going to go for kind of a 70s, 80s crunch tone. So what you're going to hear here is we have our volume set up. Once we've done that, we're going to go over here to our treble setting. Now our treble basically controls the top end frequencies of our sound, and you're going to hear what that is in just a moment. But you'll notice on here I have what's called a 3-band EQ or equalizer. When we're controlling a 3-band EQ, it means you're going to have bass, middle, and treble. In some amps, such as the Fender amps that I've seen, you may or may not have the middle option. In this case, we do. We have all three, but some of them will just have bass and treble, and that's totally fine. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to use all three, and then if you can only have two, then that's fine. Just leave out the last one. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start off with the treble, and I'm going to give you a sample of just what it sounds like with the treble off and with the treble on at 100%, so you can hear the difference in what's going on here. So I'm just going to start with it just like this. So this is completely off. Everything, as you can see across the entire board, is zeroed out except for the volume. Okay, so treble is basically completely off. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it all the way up. Okay, so with it all the way on, especially if I strum it a little bit harder, it sounds really thin and kind of, it's kind of brisk. It really is kind of too abrasive. Whereas if I turn it all the way off, the sound has no definition. There's no attack to it. So what I'm going to do to get started is I'm just going to start with the treble, and I'm going to try to adjust it up until the point where the treble becomes, like, starts to clear the sound, makes the tonality more clear. And then once I reach that point, I'm going to stop. So watch this as I do it. I'm going to kind of do it on the spot here as we do this. So I'm going to start with just, starting at a lower treble, and I'm going to hear this, and I'm going to start turning it up and strumming the guitar. I'm just strumming a G chord until I get to a point where it sounds a little bit more clear. Okay, so I think I'm happy with that. That's fairly clear. It basically, I have enough of treble in there to make the notes make sense, like so I can hear the difference between the strings, but not so much that it becomes harsh on your ears. Once we've done that, we're going to go to the bass adjustment, and we're going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to start with it off as we've been listening to it. So this is off. Now, if I were just to turn this up to 100%, listen to this. What will happen, especially when you're listening to it through an actual speaker, keep in mind that what you're hearing right now is coming through directly from the amp, and you're not actually hearing it through a speaker. This is what you're basically going to hear is that if you have too much bass, it's going to sound like flobby on the bottom end, so like kind of flappy, kind of you're just going to hear that it has no definition. It kind of loses the clarity that the treble helps to bring out. And so what we try to do is we want to balance this, and I personally really like the bass. Like it's one of those things that really gives you the punch that you're looking for, but you just don't want too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing the same thing as I did with the treble. I'm going to dial it up until it feels right, and it's not too much on the bottom end, but just enough. So here we go. Okay, so I'm liking it there for the moment, but this is very flexible, so you can go back and adjust stuff later, obviously. Now, we have the bass set up here, and then the treble, so we have those two degrees of that. I'm going to turn off the microphone for just a moment so you can hear this as well. Okay, now that you've heard that, we'll go and we'll adjust the mids. Now the mids are probably the most expressive of all of the channels. So for example, when I'm playing through this with no mids, you're gonna have mostly just what we have right now, just this kind of sound where you have a top end and a bottom end, but nothing in between. And what we're going to do is we're going to try playing with this, filling it in. So just like we do with the others, I'm going to turn it all the way up so you can hear the difference between off and on, and then we'll find the area that we want in between those. So here's off. And then here's all the way on at 100%. So the mids have both characteristics of the treble and the bass. If they're all the way off, then you're going to end up with more of that boomy, bassy sound that we were talking about if we have too much bass that we can end up with. If you had it up too high, then you're going to end up with too much treble. It could be too aggressive. And so what we're going to try to do is kind of find the middle ground with the mids. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do this again, just kind of find the place that I'm comfortable with. Okay, so for the kind of slappy, bluesy sound that we're looking for, the mids right there seem about right, and I'm feeling like I want to adjust the treble a little bit too, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Cool, so we're good to go. Now that we have the equalizer set up and I've got the sound that I want from there as far as just how the balance is set up, I can then go and mess with all this other fancy stuff. So I got boost, modulation, I have delay and FX, and I have reverb over here. And then I also have this presence knob over here, which some amps have. A lot of them don't, but some of them do. Before we do any of that stuff, we're going to go over here and actually change the amplifier settings themselves, which are the gain settings. Now, with the gain, basically what it is that you have a thing called headroom when you're setting up your amp. And basically what this means is that in most amps, when you increase the gain, you're going to end up with more breakup, more distortion. So you can already hear I have some crunch because the amp is designed to emulate a tube breakup. When you push a tube, they start to crack up like this. When we add more gain, it's going to add more of that sound. So listen to this. We have it off now. We're going to turn it up to 100% just like we were doing before. And I can hear there's pretty stark difference there between off and all the way on. Now, I probably don't really want it to be at 100 because that becomes a little bit too much, a little bit too heavy, a little bit more too rock and roll, not quite enough crunchy, bluesy type of sound for me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find the middle ground about how much I want on that. So let's do that. Okay, so now we've got the sound we want with the gain setting. Now, the last ones that are over here, and you may or may not have these, it just depends on what type of amp you have, are these different effects. And every amp will have different selection of these too, so you might have to do a little more reading in your instruction manual on these. But I'm going to give you the top two that I'm going to work on whenever I set up an amp. And the first one is always the reverb for me. The reverb basically is just an echoing effect. Now, it's not going to be, there's two different ones. We're going to do delay and the reverb. So reverb is like if you are in the Grand Canyon and you hear, like you go and you yell, and then you hear it bounce back to you quickly. Like if you're in a small, if you're in a room or something like that where you hear it come back to you quickly, and that's the type of sound you get. With a delay, it's more like if you are in a stadium and you go and you yell, and then you hear it bounce back to you after a longer delay, like a longer period of time before the sound comes back to you. So the reverb is more immediate, delay is longer time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the reverb, and I'll show you once again. This is just set up as a basic reverb sound. I'm going to play it all the way up and show you how it goes. So you can tell that's a lot. It's like, it sounds like you're in a really echoey room. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to use a little bit of this, but not too much. Because with a little bit, it really helps to fill out your sound and add a whole lot more to what you're playing than if it's completely dry, meaning there's no other sounds on it besides just the straight up guitar. When you add more reverb, it kind of gives it a wetter, fuller sound to it. And so that's what we want, but we just don't want to overdo it. So let's try that. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. It's going to give you a little bit of a follow-up to what you're after you're playing. Now, you can play with that, more or less. Everybody has a different preference. Once we do that, we go over here to the delay setting. Now, the delay, like I said, is kind of like if you're in a stadium and you yell and you hear the sound bounce back to you, you're going to hear more of that effect where it's going to come back at a slower pace. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this up. Now, I have another setting down here where I'm going to be playing with this too, but usually what you can do is on a lot of amps, you'll have a button where you can actually click on it to set the speed and set the tempo on here. Now, if you press that button, it's going to set the beats to how fast it's going to go. I already have mine preset, so I'm just going to be playing with that, but you can hear this and kind of hear what's going on with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this. I'm just going to turn it up a bit. And we'll listen to that. We'll start off at 100 and then go from there. Oops, that switched to a different effect while I was messing with it. Let me do this real quick here. That's the one we were looking for. Here's the delay. So this is a really, really heavy delay where you can hear it immediately pop back and it's as loud as it was before. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this down and it's actually going to decrease the volume with which it bounces back. So listen to this. And now I'm going to set to the volume that I would like. Cool, so I think we've got our sound. Basically, that's how you do it. So I'm going to play just a little more riff here for you so you can kind of hear what I'm doing and how it sounds when I have this type of a channel set up. If you guys want, I can do additional videos where I'll actually do different types of sounds. I might mess with some other boosts and effects and modulations and stuff like that, so I can show you kind of how all those work. But basically, this is just how you go about setting up your most basic guitar tone. And so hopefully you guys enjoy this. I'm going to play just a little bit for you to wrap this up. And then if you guys want to see more of this, definitely join one of my classes and let me know. And I'd be glad to work with you guys from there. Let's do this.